Starting off this list at our number 10 spot, we have the Witch's Sabbath. The Witch's Sabbath is a concept in Western European folklore that describes a gathering of witches for a demonic and magical ritual. It was the meeting of the witches. It is said that during the Sabbath, witches would engage in act heresy, including devil worship, flesh consumption, and even sexual parties. The event was believed to take place on the night of a full moon, often in remote areas such as mountaintops or crossroads. The concept of the Witch's Sabbath gained popularity during the witch hunt era of the late Middle Ages and the early modern period, with many people accused of witchcraft being accused of attending such gatherings. The idea of the Sabbath was used as evidence of the devil's influence on witches and as a justification for the persecution and execution of those accused. In our number 9 spot today, we have potions. Alright, every time I see like the classic folklore depiction of a witch, I always wonder what it is that they're stirring up in that cauldron. It's bubbling, it's boiling, it's steaming. What is it? A potion, of course. Witches may drink a potion as part of a ritual meant to summon the devil or other supernatural entities. The potion may be made from a variety of ingredients, including herbs, animal parts, or even human blood. The purpose of the potion is often to induce a state of altered consciousness or heightened awareness, allowing the witch to communicate with the otherworldly entities they seek to summon. The ritualistic setting for drinking a potion may vary, but often involves a secluded location. You know, for an occult ritual, we need that eerie setting. The witch may be required to perform certain tasks or complete specific rituals before or after drinking the potion, and the concept of using psychoactive substances as part of a ritual or religious practice is found in various real-world traditions throughout history. However, the summoning of the devil is not a common practice. In our number 8 spot today, we have drawing a pentagram. The pentagram is one of the most recognizable symbols when it comes to all things occult, and drawing a pentagram is a ritualistic act commonly used in magical practices as a way to create a protective barrier or to invoke supernatural forces such as the devil himself. The pentagram is a 5-pointed star, often drawn with a circle around it, and each point represents one of the elements: earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. The pentagram is believed to have protective properties, and drawing it is often done as a way to banish negative energy or spirits, but in some magical traditions, the pentagram is also used to invoke spirits or deities, with each point representing a different aspect of the entity being invoked. The ritual of drawing a pentagram may involve specific movements, such as walking around the perimeter of the pentagram while reciting an incantation. More on that later. While the use of the pentagram has been associated with witchcraft and the occult in popular culture, it is also used in various other spiritual and religious practices. In our number 7 spot today, we have lighting candles. Candles are often used to create a certain ambiance, a vibe, to symbolize different aspects of the ritual and to invoke spiritual energy or entities. The use of specific colors of candles is believed to have different meanings and may be chosen based on the purpose of the ritual. For example, green candles may be used to attract wealth or abundance, while white candles may be used to represent purity or to invite divine energy. If you want to summon the devil, would you use red? I don't know. In some traditions, candles may also be used to represent the elements, with different colors representing earth, air, fire, and water. The act of lighting candles can also be a way to focus the mind and create a sacred space for the ritual. And by lighting candles, the practitioner may be able to connect with the inner self or the higher spiritual energies and to bring their intentions into focus. So I guess next time you're smelling candles before you buy them, think of what scent the devil might be. I feel like he has some notes of cinnamon. Cinnamon and brimstone, coming this fall to a Bath & Body Works near you. In our number 6 spot today, we have incantations. An incantation is a series of words or phrases that are believed to have a certain power or effect, often in a language that is not commonly spoken, like Latin, for example. The recitation of incantations can be a way to focus the mind and to channel spiritual energy, and it is often accompanied by specific movements or gestures. Or I guess in the case of witches, it could sort of act like a magical spell vibe. In some traditions, the incantation may be sung or chanted in a repetitive manner, creating a hypnotic or trance-like state. The purpose of reciting they're just cantations now. The purpose of reciting incantations can vary widely, from attracting love or prosperity to banishing negative energy or entities, or to summon entities. The use of incantations is often based on the belief that words have a certain power or vibration, and that by speaking certain words, the practitioner can tap into this power and create a desired outcome. Sort of like manifesting, but I guess it's like manifesting the devil. In our number 5 spot today, we have sacrifice. Some depictions of witchcraft involve the sacrifice of animals or humans as part of the ritual. This can be done as a way to appease the devil or to gain favor in exchange for the sacrifice. In reality, the vast majority of practitioners of witchcraft do not engage in animal or human sacrifice, and such practices are widely condemned by mainstream spiritual and religious groups, which feels very important to note. But that's not to say it's never happened before at a terrifying occult ritual. In fictional depictions, the sacrifice of animals or humans is often portrayed as a way to offer something of value to the devil or other demonic entities in exchange for power or favors. The sacrifice may be accompanied by other ritualistic elements, such as the other ones that we've spoken about today. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Ouija board. Ouija boards are a popular divination tool that have been used for over a century to communicate with spirits or entities from the other side. The board consists of letters, numbers, and other symbols, and is often used in conjunction with a planchette, a small device that moves across the board to spell out messages. While Ouija boards are not inherently connected to witchcraft, they have been associated with the practice in pop culture. This association may be due in part to the fact that the boards were originally marketed as a parlor game in the late 19th century, but quickly became associated with the spiritualist movement and other alternative belief systems. In popular culture, witches may use Ouija boards as a means of communicating with the devil or other demonic entities, or to gain insight into the future and other spiritual realms. Just remember, at the end of each Ouija board session, it is imperative to close things and properly say goodbye, or else who knows what might be left in our realm. In our number 3 spot today, we have the special objects. Witches may use specific objects or tools as a part of their ritual. These may include things like crystals, herbs, bones, or other items that are believed to have magical properties or specific energies. The witch may also use ritualistic tools such as a wand or a tame to direct energy or focus their intentions. The use of specific objects and tools is meant to create a certain ambiance or to focus the mind, or maybe based on specific traditions or beliefs. Certain demons may have certain objects associated with them that could ease in appeasing them upon summoning, and some other objects might just be used to help assist in the desired outcome. In our number 2 spot today, we have the pact. In fictional depictions of witchcraft, making a pact with the devil is often portrayed as a way for witches to gain supernatural powers or other favors. The pact may involve the witch offering their soul or performing certain tasks for the devil in exchange for these benefits. The ritualistic setting for making a pact with the devil may vary, but often involves a secluded location such as a dark forest or abandoned building. The witch may be required to perform certain tasks or complete specific rituals as a part of the pact making process, which may involve the use of special objects or incantations. The concept of making a pact with a supernatural entity is found in various mythological and folkloric traditions throughout history. In reality, however, the vast majority of practitioners of witchcraft do not engage in such practices, and such pacts are not a common element of mainstream spiritual or religious groups. It is definitely not recommended to make a deal with the devil, because things are never as good as they may seem at first. There's always a catch with that contract. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have dancing in a circle. In fictional depictions of witchcraft, dancing in a circle is often portrayed as a key element of a ritual meant to summon the devil or other demonic entities. The circle may be drawn on the ground or formed by the witches holding hands, and the dancing may be accompanied by chanting, singing, or the playing of musical instruments. The purpose of the circle dance is often to create a certain energy or atmosphere and to symbolize the unity of the witches in their goal of summoning the devil. The circle may also serve as a protective barrier, keeping the witches safe from any negative energies or entities that may be summoned. Many believe that using movement and rhythm helps with the purpose of summoning demonic entities, and when attempting to summon the ruler of hell himself, you definitely need to bring out all the stops.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Dark origins. The Salem witch trials began back in 1692. It kicked off when a group of young girls in the Massachusetts village accused several women of witchcraft. These children were said to be cursed by the devil himself. Okay. The first of 19 convicted sentenced to death was Bridget Bishop. She was the first to be hanged that June, while 18 others soon met their same fate on Gallows Hill. There were many more convicted of witchcraft. It didn't just stop after these 19 deaths. There were men, women, children, even animals were once convicted of witchcraft. But I'll dive into that real soon. The origins of accusing one of witchcraft goes back even further than Salem. See, back in the 14th century, belief in the devil and witches and all that jazz came to be in Europe. So it's been around for a while. It wasn't just like one day, all of a sudden a turn of events. Also, like I mentioned, it wasn't just human beings. Number 9, hide your pets. One of the craziest things about looking back to the Salem witch trials has to be that animals were also found guilty of witchcraft. And yes, I'm being dead serious. They would accuse animals of witchcraft wizardry. Okay, the thought process here was that some or most of these witches kept animals as helpers, like Ratatouille, except spooky. No better sous chef than a golden retriever. To be fair, Air Bud played like 9 different sports, so I don't totally disagree. The dog can kickflip. But cats, okay, now you're just getting crazy. On the official list of victims from the Salem witch trials, 2 cats were accused, as well as 2 dogs. These villagers, their mindset was, if their pet was behaving strangely, it must mean they're working with witches in the middle of the night. Not the poison rye, no, definitely not. For sure a part-time witch. Villagers believed that witches traveled at night not by broom, but by riding on the back of your furry friend. It also wasn't just dogs or cats. They thought witches rode pigs, cows, wolves, dogs, turtles. Imagine a witch riding a turtle. Like, we can stop this witch. That's going nowhere fast. Number 8, confess. I'll admit I've spent hours and hours watching confession tapes on Netflix and all those shows. It's intense. It's a long, horrible process to get somebody to admit to a crime. But back in the day, they had a much quicker, messier method. See, if you confessed to being a witch, your life was spared. And oddly enough, if you refused to confess, then you were executed. In the meantime though, while you had a bunch of idiots scream at you for being good at math, you know, being a witch and all, your head was being dunked in water, you were sleep deprived. These horrible torture methods were used until you were so broken that you basically just admitted to being a witch even though you obviously weren't. How horrible and insane is that? If you were suspected of witchcraft, you also had to get naked in front of these weirdos while they look for the devil's mark. Birthmarks, moles, blemishes on the skin, all signs of making deals with the devil apparently. This freckle would have ruined my life. Number 7, Giles Corey. Out of the 27 people who had their lives taken away from them during the 1692 trials, 17 were hanged, 7 passed away in prison while serving their sentence, and the last victim, Giles Corey, refused to plead either innocent or guilty. And the law at the time states that you can't be tried otherwise. So what they did next was horrible. They laid this heavy board on top of the 81-year-old man, and then over the course of 2 days, boulders were added one by one slowly over time, making the weight more and more unbearable. They were hoping that Giles would break and that he would admit something, either of which way, but every time they asked him anything, Giles responded with, "More weight." How brave is that dude? After 2 days of this torture, Corey sadly passed away, still in full possession of his estate, which then went to his sons-in-law. He sadly did the best thing he could have long term, and I'll get into that later on. Number 6, smallpox. In 1692, 500 people lost their lives due to smallpox. This happened after Europeans brought the disease to North America, and then in results you would get covered in these sores, these pimple-like bubbles. It was horrible. So rather than recognize the situation as symptoms from a disease, the fine people of Salem thought, you know what, they're probably witches. That's probably a sign of being a witches. You know, the bubbles and stuff. Bubbles and boils and trouble, or whatever they say. I don't know, stupid. The small Massachusetts village began this wave of hysteria with 2 young girls, Betty Paris and Abigail Williams. They started to show signs of this disease. They were convulsing, and so the village doctor, William Griggs, just said that they were bewitched. Then other villagers slowly started to also show symptoms because, you know, science, that's how it works. And then today we can guess that rye bread is the culprit and not witchcraft. Number 5, rye bread. Turning the clocks past the witching hour a few hundred years, back in 1976, Linda Caporio from the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute came to a conclusion that is less spooky than witches, but makes a lot more sense. The village did not get hit with a full moon wave of bewitchment, but rather rye disease. Ergotism forms in rye when it's a harsh winter, and then immediately it's a damp spring. So the rye grows as purple and black fungus, but back then people didn't know any better, and they thought that the color change was due to overexposure from the sun. So they ate it anyways, got sick, and then got accused of witchcraft. What a horrible week. It's referred to as St. Anthony's fire. You convulse, you experience delusions, it also feels like bugs are under your skin, and you even get gangrene in some conditions. But the doctors back then didn't know any of that, but he did know religion, so he thought the devil was at work here and nothing else. Then magically in May 1693, a year later, the witch trials abruptly stopped. Did they get every witch, or did Salem just run out of contaminated grain? I vote the latter. Number 4, touch test. There were numerous tests that had to be done to see if a villager was a witch. They didn't go one-on-one with the mayor and play Quidditch. No, they instead just had to go along with all their ridiculous games. The touch test, for example, they believed that victims would react to being touched by the witch that cursed them. So they'd make this witch poke a child during a smallpox poison rye episode, and if they had a negative reaction to being touched, they believed that that was the initial witch that caused the curse. How stupid is that? Even if the cursed calmed down, they would still think that witchcraft is at play. They thought that it was a calming spell in that way. So either way, really, you're pretty much screwed. For example, the trials of Rose Cullender and Amy Denny. They were these two elderly women, and they both were hanged because two blindfolded young girls reacted to their touch. Although it's stated as well that these young girls reacted similarly to many others. It's almost like witchcraft isn't real and these people were just sick. Number 3, rigged test. So while the touch test was an absolute load of the poke test was even worse. The idea that witches didn't feel pain was also out there. That's what people believed in, although they tortured people until they confessed to being a witch. Logic. So the classic trick was to use a fake pin and then pretend to poke a witch, haha, and then when they didn't react, you can call them out for being a witch for not reacting, leading to their immediate death. The touch test was also rigged after this point because whoever accused them would have to touch the witch, and if they started to show odd behavior, then that's how you know they're a real witch. So you could have just touched their elbow and been like, oh, I'm so lightheaded. And then just like that, a grown adult is sentenced to death for being a witch. Nice, awesome, way to go. Here's a cool test, levitate. Levitate and then we'll call you a witch. Otherwise, I'm going home. Number 2, cake. Of all the nonsensical tests performed during the Salem witch trials, this one takes the cake. I had to do it with at least one pun. It sounds delicious, but in reality, it was just spreading the disease even more. Who knew? This was a popular method of seeking out witchcraft in England as well. What they would do is make a cake out of, well, you guessed it, rye flour, the old rye trick, and then add a little bit of urine from the accused. I'm more of a chocolate cake kind of guy than urine. What about you, Chris? Chocolate, vanilla, urine? Urine, nice, that's good. Old school, a classic man. But don't worry, nobody ate this cake, just an unfortunate village dog had to eat it. They would feed this pee-pee cake to a dog, then if a dog showed the same symptoms, you know, being sick from said rye, then the town knows for sure that the accused is guilty. Man, I wish one villager was like, maybe it's the rye. Hey, maybe it's the pea you put in the cake. I don't know, call me crazy, I'll leave, call me crazy, I don't know. And finally, number 1. Lost land. While all these punishments sound just awful, be it poke tests, torture devices, disgusting cake recipes, one of the biggest explanations for the Salem witch trials was how the government handled property during these crimes. They would confiscate the accused home, and that's why Giles Corey was stuck under those boulders for days before his death. He was odd to them, he broke their system. Anything bad or odd was also a sign of the devil, although at the same time they were whipping up torture tools. Gotcha, makes sense.
Coming up at our number 10 spot, we have Julia Brown. Now, Julia Brown is from a small town in Louisiana, and she was known to be a pretty terrifying witch in her time. She became known as a witch because she would perform spells and had charms, and yes, she would place curses on people. Yeah, this is a real person, folks. Apparently, she would perform rituals for people in the town and do spells for them, and eventually they began to take advantage of her, and that is when things took a turn. She started to tell people that bad things were going to happen to them. She would make predictions for them, such as tell them their death dates, and that really creeped a lot of people out. She loved to sing, and at some point she created a song about how she was going to get revenge on the town when she died. When I die, I'm taking the town with me, she sang. Well, as you might have already guessed, when she died, she certainly got revenge on the town. As her casket was being lowered, rain fell on the town, and that rain eventually turned into a hurricane that wiped out the town. Yep, she might be scarier than a demon. It's possible. In our number 9 spot, we have Moll Dyer. It is unclear if Moll Dyer was a real person or if she was just a legend. People say that she was real, however, there have been no documents to prove this to date, so for the purpose of this video, we are going to say she was probably real. And by real, I mean a real witch, a real scary witch. Moll lived in Maryland in the 17th century. She apparently had tormentors when she was alive and put a curse on them before she died. She died running away from them and froze to death on a rock that the town still displays today, as apparently you can still see her handprint on the rock. The ancestors of her tormentors apparently are all cursed with bad luck. Well, all I can say is I would not want to marry into one of their families. Also, how do we know that they are still cursed with bad luck if they are, born and then told that they are cursed with bad luck? Because maybe they have attracted it now because they believe that they have bad luck. I say those people need to leave the town, forget this legend, and see if the next generation has bad luck, and then we will have proof if this curse has actually continued. Moll was spoken about in the famous movie The Blair Witch Project, in which I have not seen, but probably should. In our number 8 spot, we have Kate Batts. This is probably one of the scariest witches on this list. Kate Batts was a neighbor to a man named John Bell and apparently was a witch tormenting John and his family from her grave. Very powerful. John and his daughter Betsy were tormented in many different ways. Betsy was attacked apparently by an unknown force, and they would both hear chain sounds and always feel on edge. Eventually, the entity that was tormenting them told them that she was their former neighbor, Kate Batts, and that she was going to destroy their family. Eventually, John was found dead with a small vial of liquid beside him, believed to be poison from Kate the entity. Apparently, she stopped tormenting the family after John passed. Why she was tormenting the family is unknown, but perhaps it was because John did something bad to her when she was alive. That's the only explanation I can think of. Perhaps his guilty conscience could have concocted the whole story. That feels possible as well. In our number 7 spot, we have Gerald Gardner. Known as the creator of Wicca, a religious version of witchcraft, Gerald Gardner is arguably scarier than a demon to some, but perhaps just an egotistical man to most. In 1954, he wrote a book called Witchcraft Today, and it became widely popular around the world, and it helped pave the way for more widespread acceptance of witchcraft. So even though that has done a lot of good for the community, he is a bit of a controversial character that may have caused harm as well. A lot of people are angry at the fact that he became known as the founder of Wicca when he himself did not actually find it. He just wrote a book about it and then got credited for it. This has angered many witches around the world, and many people are frustrated that he has claimed the title of founder when he indeed is not. Nobody likes a faker, and it does not do any good for the religion to have its leader be dishonest. Coming up in our number 6 spot, we have La Voisine. Catherine, aka La Voisine, was a witch in the 1600s in France who would do spells, mix potions, and tell fortunes to the townspeople. Apparently, she would hold black masses and she would channel the devil. She really grew to fame when she discovered that a lot of wives wanted their husbands to pass away, and so she created potions to help them do so. She gained quite a bit of fortune from these potions. After some time, she became more and more dark as she began to take the lives of innocent people as a sacrifice for the devil, and eventually she was arrested for killing many people and she was, burned at the stake. This woman seems absolutely terrifying, and I am so glad that I live in 2022 and not the 16th century. Definitely seems more terrifying than a demon. On second thought, perhaps she was actually one. In our number 5 spot, we have Agnes Sampson. Agnes was a well-known healer in her time, which was around 1590, when the King of Scotland single-handedly started the witch trials around the world due to his paranoia over witches and his belief that a witch was the cause for a few big storms in Scotland. Talk about paranoid. Heesh. Anyways, Agnes was one of the witches that was captured during this time and tortured and thrown in jail. She was known for her healing potions that worked like magic, and so naturally she was accused of being a witch. They didn't have naturopaths back then, so there's that. Anyways, turns out they were right to accuse her because while in jail, she actually confessed and said that she worshipped Satan and that she even was physically involved with him, if you catch my drift. So yeah, after this, she was sentenced to death. In our number 4 spot, we have Anne Hibbins. In the 1650s, there was a woman by the name of Anne Hibbins who was accused of being a witch. And perhaps she was, but maybe not in the typical way like the others on this list. Perhaps she was just not a great person and her personality was scarier than a demon and she perhaps got what she deserved. Apparently Anne was a very wealthy woman, being very connected, and her brother-in-law was a future governor of Massachusetts and her husband was a civil law officer. Her husband apparently condemned a woman for being a witch. When he passed away, she was left a bit in ruin and she wasn't very well liked. She had sued a bunch of carpenters years prior that her community loved, and that made people hate her. She was then accused of being a witch and sentenced to death. There's not too many reports on her, so it's hard to say if she really was a nasty woman or not, but if she was, then all I can say is this sounds like the case of Queen Karma herself. In our number 3 spot, we have Alice Keitler. Alice Keitler was one of the first witches known in Ireland. She apparently was married 4 times and outlived all of her husbands. Yep, of course that was unusual for this period, which was the 13th century. All of her husbands died mysteriously, and after every one, people grew more and more suspicious of her, naturally. Until her final husband died, then his kids accused her of poisoning him. Eventually, rumors began to spread that she had killed her husbands as offerings to the devil himself. She also wasn't very well liked in the town, so that didn't help her case either. But apparently she had been worshipping him for decades. People began pushing for her to be captured and to have a formal trial, but before they were able to, she fled the country. Thus proving that she probably did kill her husbands. She might not have been a witch, but it's definitely possible she was. In our number 2 spot, we have Malin Matsdottir. Malin and her husband were either evil or they were being possessed, because their story really gives me the creeps. In 1676, Malin's husband was sentenced to death for being inappropriate with an animal. Makes me sick. And Malin was accused of being a witch by her own daughter. Her daughter said that she would worship the devil. Apparently, many young ones went missing in her town, and people believed that she snatched them and sacrificed them. At her trial, she was accused of taking them, and since her daughter was among the accusers, she had no chance. She was sentenced to death. She died without a sound, which confirmed to many that she was a real witch because they apparently don't feel pain. Guys, maybe she was a real witch. If I get too close to the oven and feel the heat, I react. So if I was her, I would have made my exit the most dramatic show anyone would ever see. So dramatic people would laugh and wish they hadn't burned me. In our number 1 spot, we of course have Aleister Crowley. Not all witches are women, folks. Probably the worst witch that I have ever read about was a male, and he was the darkest they come. People called him the wickedest man to have ever existed. Scarier than a demon. In fact, he was probably Satan himself. Of course, I'm speaking of Aleister Crowley, who was alive not too long ago. Close to 100 years ago, he was being kicked out of Italy for his occult gatherings, where it is believed that he channeled Satan and everyone danced naked under the moon. Such fun. He would refer to himself as the Beast or the Antichrist. He traveled around the world promoting his religion called Thelma and promoted his teachings. He wrote many books, including the Book of Thoth, the Book of Lies, and the Book of the Law. The scary thing about Aleister is that people still follow his teachings today.
At number 10, we have the Hathorne family curse. So there's a book by Nathaniel Hawthorne, and it was influenced by a curse put upon the Hathorne family. Many of the author's stories were inspired by his ancestors from Salem, John Hathorne and his father William. Both ancestors were remembered for their persecution of Quakers and witches. There were rumors of a curse put upon the family for their actions towards others, like the Quakers and the witches, and Nathaniel apologized for that in a story before the Scarlet Letter. He said about John Hathorne that he made himself so conspicuous in the martyrdom of the witches that their blood may fairly be said to have left a stain upon him. So deep a stain indeed that his old dry bones in the Charter Street burial ground must still retain it if they have not crumbled utterly to dust. And yeah, that's pretty metal. And after that, he said he took shame upon himself for those actions and asked for the curse to be removed, because throughout time, their family seemed to get less and less success, just in general. And after that, the Scarlet Letter became a successful book, still read to this day. So I'm gonna take that as a lesson on how to apologize. Very eloquent. On to number 9, the Curse of Melas. So there is a legend about Salem that it got its name from an evil warlock named Melas. So apparently this magic user tried to curse the new settlement of Nam Kiag. But then the people of the settlement changed the name of the town to Salem, which is the warlock's name in reverse. For that, it is said they became safe forever and he could not step foot in the town. Is this true? No, probably not. There is no historical basis for this. The name is derived from the Hebrew word shalom, which means peace, so it's meant to just be a peaceful town. But if this was true, you know, just good on them. That is some quick and easy thinking to protect yourself, and if you think about it at the time, the warlock wasn't really a term that was used, so that just kind of builds more of a case against this legend. But kind of cool as like a name origin. On to number 8, the Black Houses. So the older houses in Salem draw quite a bit of attention because of their dark exteriors. Like maybe you could say it's a design choice, but that is not what is believed. One story that is spread about why they have the color is that they are stained dark with the blood of the indigenous people and witches' blood. According to the legend, it was in order to scare them away to prevent raids or magic of the settlement, but the legend does not hold up at all. The likely reason is that tar was used to reinforce buildings and protect them from wearing down due to their close proximity to the sea. After all, tar was used to make ships more waterproof, so it would work for buildings too. And then of course, tar, it's quite dark, makes the houses dark. Correlation does not equal causation. Fun. On to number 7, George Corwin Torture Dungeon. So we will be talking about Jonathan Corwin, the witch house owner and witchcraft trial judge, but first his nephew. He goes down in history as being the torturer of those accused, most famously for the torture of Giles Corey. He had stones pressed upon his chest, crushing him to death for 3 days. It is said that George Corwin was so sadistic that he had a secret dungeon below his home where he could torture as many people as he wanted. It was also the sheriff that also was in part there for the crushing to death of Giles Corey. But as there is no such documentation of a torture dungeon happening, it is a possibility that he either did do it and went to elaborate lengths to cover it up, or it wasn't true at all. But moving on to number 6, Jonathan Corwin House, aka the Salem Witch House. So it's the only structure still standing in Salem that has direct ties to the witch trials. There were many deaths associated with the house, which has led to its possible elevated levels of paranormal activity. Many children of the Corwins died in that house while they lived there, and it is believed that the spirits of those children who passed away haven't left those halls. People in there cite sudden temperature drops and drafts in the rooms of the witch house, saying that might be the presence of some of the children in there. Other than that, they hear some light footfalls and little light children's laughter, and they're thinking it's the young Corwins. More with the Corwins at number 5, Under the Corwin House. So this legend isn't about the haunting of the house, but what was found after it moved. And yes, the house itself moved in the 1940s to accommodate for the widening of the street. There was a newspaper article that talked about the bones found underneath the original hearth that led people to believe that there were hidden corpses underneath the witch house. And there were bones there, but it is possible that they weren't the corpses of humans, but they were the corpses of animals. So back when the original house was built in the 1640s, it was common for bones and meat to be buried underneath the cooking hearth as a way to promote plentiful food for whoever uses it. Plus, charred bones made from cooking, just like meat and stuff and stews, could have made their way into the hearth or underneath it and end up under the house, so could have been that as well. Probably not human bones, but maybe? Who knows? Let's move on to number 4, a secret voodoo queen. One of the first people to be accused of witchcraft during the trials was Tituba. So the myth going around her was that she was secretly teaching the girls black magic and voodoo, and on top of that she was famous in her home country of Haiti as a voodoo queen. Even more, the myth states that her whole purpose of being in Salem was to teach the children to be voodoo practitioners. But, as I've been saying, this legend is mainly myth. What we do know through records is that the girls of the Paris household were having fits and convulsions, and witchcraft was a supposed or possible reason. Titubo supposedly made them a witch cake, and its purpose was to find out who was bewitching them, not to bewitch them. In any case, that would have been beneficial magic, but she was still kind of the start of the witch hunt, unfortunately. But let's go back to someone we've talked about so far. At number 3, the ghost of Giles Corey. So Giles Corey, as we talked about, was crushed to death, but before that he was a supporter of the witch trials, so much so that he testified against his own wife, Martha. And yeah, I see, taking death do us part a bit seriously there, Giles. Jeez. But karma came back to bite him because Giles himself was accused of being a witch. Although he said he was innocent, he refused to officially enter a plea during his trial, and this ended up with Sheriff Corwin trying to torture it out of him. To try to get a confession out of him, he piled rocks on top of him, and he was publicly crushed to death as a result, and this led others to question the validity of these trials. because that's not very valid to be crushed to death. Anyways, before his demise, Giles Corey reportedly shouted at the sheriff, "Damn you, I curse you and Salem." And then, 4 years later, Corwin died of a heart attack at the age of 30. It was quite sudden and begets the question, was it a result of the curse? Now Giles' ghost is believed to haunt the Howard Street Cemetery. If you see him, it is said to be a bad omen. Witnesses saw his ghost just before the Great Salem Fire of 1914. So, number 2, Joshua Ward's house. This brick mansion was built for Joshua Ward on the old property of the land of Sheriff George Corwin. And yes, that Sheriff Corwin we just talked about, who was the man who slowly tortured and crushed a man to death. Right. Under his watch, the accused witches were hung, and with that comes not a lot of great spiritual energy. Also, did you know his nickname was the Strangler? Ooh. Anyways, after a sudden heart attack in 1697 that we discussed, his family had him interred in the cellar because it was too cold to bury him, and they were worried about Salem residents dismembering his corpse in revenge. Anyways, his body stayed in the house for a handful of years before it was moved to the Broad Street Cemetery. Now, several ghosts reportedly haunt the spot where Joshua Ward's house now stands, including Corwin himself and the spirit of one of his victims, you guessed it, Giles Corey. People have also seen the angry ghost of a woman with wild black hair. She is believed to be another victim of the witch trials. But let's finish it off with a fun one. At number 1, we have the bread was behind it all. So there is this fun, wild theory that there was a type of mold that grew on the rye that the people of Salem used in the making of their bread. The mold was called ergot and was said to have a somewhat magical effect, like LSD, and it caused those who ate it to see and hear things that weren't there. This legend alleged that the druggy bread caused a mass hallucination or even separate hallucinations, and that is why people were accused of witchcraft. As nice as it is to think that people weren't being sent to be hanged for witchcraft with little to no proof, it did happen, and there was no bread that was causing these hallucinations. 19 women were hung for their crimes of witchcraft in Salem, and 1 man was crushed to death. That's what happened. But the bread is a cute idea to suspend your disbelief of the atrocities of man, so fun one to include at the end, right? Oh.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Mother Shipton. Yeah, we're going medieval for this list. I mean, obviously. From the 1400s to the 1700s alone, there were around 50,000 individuals who were all found guilty of witchcraft. Isn't that insane? And we all know what that meant. That was a one-way trip to the guillotine. But how many of these were actual witches? I mean, really? I mean, they probably just knew bed mass, realistically. That's probably the case for most of these. We'll start with a woman named Mother Shipton, aka Ursula Southiel. She was a clairvoyant from the 16th century, England's greatest, if that. Her mother, as well, was widely known to be a witch. It's always a fun little fact, always runs in the family. But Ursula, she was so good at her job, she was often compared to Nostradamus. Apparently, she predicted the Great Fire of London, and also the execution of Mary Queen of Scots, and also the internet. Yeah, she straight up called the World Wide Web. In the 16th century, she predicted around the world that one day thoughts shall fly in the twinkling of an eye. Yeah, cut to today, it's just people tweeting about their cat's foot fungus. We're like, yeah, she's not wrong. Mother Shipton had to start off with this list because she actually passed away a peaceful death. Yeah, not too bad. We'll start off nice and slow. She wasn't hunted down by any mobs. She was actually buried on unholy grounds in 1561. Was she inherently cursed? Did her mother pass on a gift? We'll never know. Most likely though, for sure. That's some pretty... She called the internet. Like that's crazy. Number 9, Agnes Sampson. Turning the clocks forward now, around 30 years after Mother Shipton. The general public wasn't always easy when it came to clairvoyance, obviously, or gifted individuals. So around 1590, when King James VI was in ruling over Scotland, this was an important time because the lovely Anne of Denmark, Norway, his wife, she was very much opposed to all this dark magic happening around her. Yeah, you always have that one friend who doesn't watch scary movies or doesn't like to talk about Ouija boards. I get it. Yeah, keep that bad juju out of the house, away from the royal family. For sure, I get it. During one commute back to Scotland, this is when it all started. The couple barely made it through fierce storms, so King James VI, he was now convinced that the storms were the outcome of black magic. Yeah, they were just talking and they were afraid. That entire commute, now they believe that witches were to blame. The North Berwick area saw 70 convicted witches after that, all because of one storm. Yeah, including one Agnes Sampson. Yeah, the charges sound pretty wild. The king and queen all believed that these witches attended a coven on Halloween night before their commute. Agnes denied all of these charges, obviously, but it didn't matter. Of course it didn't matter. She was held a prisoner until she had to confess. That's when she finally met her fate. Her nonsensical fate. Number 8, Malin Matsdottir. It's one thing for a town to turn against you out of the blue because they're spooked, but imagine family. Yeah, that's horrible. That's exactly what happened to Malin Matt's daughter. She was a Swedish widow, and her own daughter told everybody in town that her mother was a witch. Yeah, that's brutal. She was the last victim of the Great Swedish Witch Hunt in 1676, also known as the Great Noise. So she was the last one ever, which is a good sign. Malin goes down in history because 1, it was thankfully one of the last ever, executions. And 2, she never admitted once. She didn't cry out in pain the entire time. She didn't beg for forgiveness all during this awful punishment. She said it was all hogwash and she stood by it. Her daughter was actually later found guilty of perjury, so she too met a similar fate. Yeah, goes around, comes around. That's pretty horrible. Number 7, Mirja Bien. This German heiress from the 17th century already had a rough go when it came to finding love. Yeah, she was now on her 3rd husband when all of this horribleness around her began to unfold. 17th century Germany. Out of the blue, Prince Abbot Balthasar von Dürnbach ordered a witch hunt, and this one lasted from 1602 to 1605. Yeah, just a bunch of grown adults walking around to see if anybody mentions magic or coincidences, and then they're like, all right, time to go punish you until you confess. Like, this is so stupid when you look back now. When Mirja had literally just returned to the city right after an argument with her husband's friends, the town was already spooked because of this witch hunt, and then Miss Mirja arrives and they think, this lady's on her 3rd marriage. After 14 years, they still haven't conceived, therefore, she must be a witch. Yeah, for sure a witch, let's do it. And then in 1603, she met her fate as well, all because of some spooked civilians and a lousy order sent from a lousy prince. Number 6, Bridget Bishop. In 1692, 500 people lost their lives due to smallpox. This happened right after Europeans brought the disease to North America, and in result, you would get covered in these sores, these pimple-like bubbles. It was really awful. History is gross. So rather than recognize the situation as symptoms from a disease, the fine people of Salem thought, oh, they're probably just witches. The small Massachusetts village began this wave of hysteria with 2 young women, Betty Paris and Abigail Williams. They started to show signs of said disease. They were convulsing, acting strange. Obviously, they were extremely ill. And so the village doctor, William Griggs, just said that they were bewitched. He was like, ah, yes, cursed. Like, what? No. This guy was around today, the whole operation would have been screwed. Then other villagers slowly started to show similar symptoms because, well, science, that's how that works. And today, we now have another idea of what may have caused all that mass hysteria this entire time. But I'll save that for number 1. But at this time, they believed the first witch to start this entire Salem witch hunt was Bridget Bishop. Yeah, the OG Salem witch. Over the next few months, around 150 more were convicted, all meeting their horrible similar fate on Gallows Hill. Maybe it was Bridget Bishop, but again, there's another theory, but we're almost there. Makes a little more sense than witchcraft, I'd say. Number 5, meowing nuns. If I'm not going to talk about this now, then I'm not sure when I'll ever get the chance to again. This is so funny. This is so dumb. Back in the Middle Ages, a group of nuns were doing their covent nun witch thing, dark magic. They were rebels. This was an odd thing in the Middle Ages because these nuns would have meowing sessions. Yeah, this French convent, this large, might I add, convent, many of nuns would gather in groups and they would spend hours meowing all at the same time. Or try to at least, which was even more annoying. It annoyed nearby civilians so much that soldiers had to eventually come by and just beg them to stop. Look, for most of these cases, most likely not witchcraft. This one here, I think this actually was a curse, or else this is the greatest prank in history. Not sure what's going on here. Either way, we gotta talk about it. Nice number 5, nice halfway point here, Number 4, Macbeth curse. Oh boy, all you theater kids out there, you're gonna skip this one. You're like, nope, can't talk about this one, can't hear it, about it. I'm doing Grease at the end of this year. I can't watch this. This is bad juju. This is bad play juju. There's a few things you can't say to an actor before a show. Oddly enough, good luck is one of them. You're supposed to say, break a leg. Hey, break a leg. Great. Hey, good luck. Oh, sorry. Oops. No. The one thing you can't say is Macbeth. Yeah, don't say that to an actor at any point ever in life. Just don't even talk about it. The legend goes back to 1606, the time of the play's first ever performance. The actor playing Lady Macbeth died right before the show, so Shakespeare himself had to play the part. Apparently a coven of witches, always a coven of witches, eh? Apparently a coven of witches cursed the show before. Since then, there's been tales of real daggers being used accidentally in the show instead of props, resulting in, what's happening, stop. The Astor Place riot in New York back in 1849 1929. Okay, this was caused by rival actors, the American Edwin Forrest and English William Charles McGreedy. Many people lost their lives at this point, over 100 were injured, and both actors just happened to be in different productions playing Macbeth. We got a new Scooby-Doo Ghoster Coaster that we're trying out. It's good. There's countless amounts of stories recalling botched performances of the play, but what do you think? Is this the case of being in your own head, or is the Macbeth curse real? Is this a real curse brought on by real witches? It's so scary. One time I said Macbeth before a show in grade 11. I was doing Amadeus. Halfway through I realized I wasn't wearing shoes in a scene. Yeah, I forgot shoes during a quick change, so maybe I was part of that curse for a hot minute. Those pesky covens of witches. Forgot my shoes because those witches. Number 3, animal witches. Cover your pet's ears for this one. I don't want them getting any ideas at all, especially bunnies, bunnicula. We don't like those. One of the craziest things about looking back to these Salem witch trials or any of these witch trials has to be that animals were also found guilty of witchcraft. I am dead serious. They would accuse animals of witchcraft, wizardry. Yeah, no better sous chef than a golden retriever. And we'll just scoop this up. To be fair, Air Bud played like 9 different sports in this movie, so I don't completely disagree. But cats? No way. On the official list of victims from the Salem witch trials, 2 cats were accused, as well as 2 dogs. Nice and even. These villagers, their mindset was that if their pet was behaving strangely, it must mean that they're working with witches in the middle of the night. That's why they're tired and acting odd. I mean, why else, right? Villagers believed that witches traveled at night, not by broom, but by riding on the back of your furry friend. Yeah, it wasn't just dogs either. They thought witches rode cows, pigs, wolves, dogs, even turtles. Turtles? Imagine a witch riding a turtle. She'd be so late to the cauldron cook-off. Or like squirrels. Like they get around fast if they were on squirrels. Turtles, they would just be like, while other witches are flying above them, they're like, hang on, I'll be there in a sec. Number 2, rye bread or witch's curse. When we talk about these medieval witch hunts, we often ask, why did people actually do this? Why did they believe this at the time? Were we this dumb? Why were so many people okay with this? We ask this obviously in other worse, horrible situations, but we're talking about witchcraft right now. Well, recently we got some clues. In 1976, researcher Linda Caporial discovered that these villages were not cursed. There were no witches walking around just cursing folks on brooms or hairy otters, but perhaps it was the spread of rye disease. Yeah, ergotism forms in rye whenever it's a harsh winter and then immediately a damp spring, so the rye grows in this purple and black fungus, and then back then people didn't know better. They ate everything. They thought the color change was just overexposure to the sun, so they ate it. Blah. Then they got sick, and then they acted weird and were obviously in horrible conditions. Then they got accused of witchcraft because they were, they looked odd. What a horrible week. It's referred to now as St. Anthony's fire. You convulse, you experience delusions. It feels like there's bugs under your skin. You even get gangrene sometimes. It's horrible. This is where illicit substances come from nowadays, from lysergic acid. But these doctors didn't know that back then, did they? No, everyone thought they were all just cursed by black magic. No, they just needed help. Oddly enough, in May 1693, just a year later, the Salem witch trials abruptly stopped. Did they get every witch, or did Salem just run out of contaminated grain? You be the judge. And finally, number 1, Giles Corey. Out of the 27 people who had their lives taken away from them during the 1692 trials, 19 were hanged, 7 passed away in prison while serving their sentence, and the last victim was Giles Corey. We had to end on this brave man right here. He refused to plead either innocent or guilty, and the law at the time states that you can't be tried otherwise. So what they did next was horrible, as you could have guessed. They laid a board on top of the 81-year-old man, and then over the course of 2 days, boulders were slowly added, making the weight more and more unbearable. They were hoping Giles would admit something, either of both ways, but every time they asked him anything, Giles responded with, "More weight." How brave is that? How badass is that? After 2 days of this punishment, Corey passed away still in full possession of his estate, which went to his sons-in-law. If he had vowed innocence or guilt, the government would have taken that away from him, so he sadly did the best thing he could, and it did him best long term.
First, at number 10 is a spell called Wicked Things. So this curse aims to send back the pain someone inflicted upon you. Even just looking at the ingredients on this list, it seems dangerous. To do it, you need a jar with 3 live bees or hornets, a picture of the enemy, and sulfur powder. At least there's a disclaimer saying that if you have allergies to bees or hornets, you shouldn't attempt this, and I appreciate that. Just watch out for people that are trying to curse others. Sorry if I laugh a lot during this one. Okay. It says to clean your area and then start pulling energy in once you have all of the components. The person who used this spell said they used Egyptian musk and boiled mandrake root to get the right energies while pulling energy from the earth. The next step, write a message on the back of the photo. The message should say, "Slander me not, your days of hurt no more, you challenged my patience and opened this door." Then, place the folded photo and a scoop of sulfur powder in the jar, without letting out the bees and hornets, and bury that in the ground that won't be disturbed, and then you're done. That's it, curse, set, match. Number 9. This one is called Demon Possess a Friend. So, apparently people like to go around making spells that get their friends possessed, so they can have a demon friend? Seriously, a magic user came up with a spell to get a demon to possess one of your friends. The caveats are that it works best if they aren't powerful in magic. And if it's miscast, your friend may not like you anymore. Which is, yeah, I wouldn't like my friend if they decided to use my body as a vessel for a demon either, you know? Anyways, how it's done, you get a friend to cast a circle with you while telling them it's for a different spell. You concentrate on them and focus on imagining a dark energy slowly circling in on them, chipping away at them. Once you start to suspect they are weakened, ask them how they feel. If they say tired, then the spell says it's probably working. From there, you think a saying in your mind 3 times and then say it out loud. Demons, I offer you a shell. Rise up from hell and enter Yeva. Bend her, twist her, let my old friend die, and make her truly just a shell for you. After this, it says the friend will be mad, which, no duh, and then the demon will slowly take them over the course of a night. It recommends doing this over a sleepover, that way you can monitor the friend's now shell of a body. Number 8. Voodoo Revenge. Now here's a spell that claims to punish and hurt your enemy as well as make them realize what they did to you was wrong. Additionally, it claims that it will remove all positivity and good luck from them and fill them with bad luck. With all that done, your enemy will feel weak and will suffer. Kinda sad, but okay. It calls for the caster to make a doll of their enemy and then sprinkle rose water on the doll and then clean it. After that, the caster should write the name of their enemy in saffron ink on the doll. Then they should chant Dushman Montana Terho 200 times while meditating that their enemy should be destroyed. Lastly, every day the caster is to put 1 pin on the body of the doll. Voodoo Revenge. That's it. Next up at number 7 is a curse from purgatory. Now this one recommends a full moon and for the spell to be done in a dark room with a single light source like a candle. Then it calls for the caster to gather their hate and negative feelings towards a person and draw a pentagram. From there, they should write Esse Purgatorius. Then they should add more lines to the letters and connect them to make them look like runes and connect the letters chaotically. All while they're doing this, they should be channeling their hatred to indicate where the line should go. After that, they should take time to cool down a bit before chanting an incantation. I summon unholy might to bring forth purging blight, for this scoundrel has no right to step in thy light. May the gates of purgatory open and punish thee. Once the incantation is said, the person who cast the curse should throw out the paper or eat it. Their choice. Number 6. A revenge death to your enemies. Now this one clarifies that it's a metaphorical death, but still kinda dark. For this one, you need a photo of your target and a lighter. For this, you set the photo on fire as you chant, I am to avenge myself. I was on the path of destruction, but now I set you down that path. I take my revenge upon you. And then you allow the photo to turn to ashes. Quick and easy. For revenge. Still pretty scary. Number 5. A bad luck lock. Now this is apparently one of the most powerful black magic spells. To do it, you would need 1 solid padlock, a screwdriver, paper, and black paint. You would write down your target's name on the paper and then fold it. Then push the screwdriver through the paper to make a hole. And then after that, put your lock through that hole and lock it up, and then rub the black paint on the keyhole and on the lock. And then boom, you are ready to cast the spell. The spell is a prayer to lock in the blackest luck into the blackest lock. And after that, you bury the lock in your backyard and the key to the lock buried near your target. This, if you haven't already guessed, locks them in with bad luck in the bad luck lock. The blackest luck in the bad luck lock, blackest lock. Try to say that 10 times fast. Maybe that's the prayer you should say. Just saying. Number 4. Black Magic Mirror. This is another black magic spell, and yes, another one for revenge. I'm sensing a pattern. So to do this spell, you would need 1 small mirror, a long section of black ribbon, black permanent marker, bay leaf, and burnt timber ash. The author of this spell stipulates that the spell must be cast on a Saturday night. That's when all fun things happen, obviously. Now you start this ritual by writing your target's name on the mirror in big letters and scatter bay leaves on it. Then wrap up the mirror with the ribbon and sprinkle the ash on it. It says make sure to wrap up the whole thing and tie a very tight knot. Then place your hands on both sides of the mirror and chant the spell. The chant would be a prayer to inflict harm on the person 2 times of the wrong they had sent out to you. After you do that, gently place the wrap charm under a bed. The instructions say you have to keep it there until the revenge is complete, but then the moment the person meets their bad times, you should immediately take out the mirror and dismantle your spell. Because kinda goes rogue from there apparently. Number 3, Lucifer's Touch. Now this one is a pretty run-of-the-mill revenge spell, and it calls for Lucifer himself to bring darkness on your enemy. So this one says you have to have 3 black candles and enough anger to be able to work up into a frenzy. Just like an angry chihuahua, but with spells and magic. Okay, once you light the candles, you're ready to go. This one stipulates that if you have a bell, you should ring it 3 times at the beginning of the ritual. Then you say, I call the mighty bringer of light, Lucifer. Spirits of the abyss, hear my call. All most powerful one, and all Lucifer my thoughts do sing throughout the universe. They now ring. Take thine enemy, take him, smite, break him, scorn him in the night of your mightiest depths of hell. Cast your darkness on his shell. O Lucifer, O shining star, touch him, burn him from afar. Revenge now will have its days, for thine enemy starts to fry. And that's it! Just fry your enemy in Lucifer's pan of evil. Number 2 is Spiteful Demon of Torment. So this one is to summon a demon into an object to give to your enemy. It's typically used in wishes that the demon in the object will spite them and unleash their worst upon them. To cast it, a witch would set up a circle of summoning, and then they would place the item of their choice in the triangle. If you aren't familiar with the circle of summoning, the circle is meant to protect you while the triangle is to keep the summoned spirit within. Once the item is in place, the witch or caster would call forth the demon, and to do it, they would say, Come forth, I summon you. I beseech you, come forth to our realm. I offer you sanctuary here where you may carry out your evil deeds upon thy enemy. Harm them as they have harmed me. Come to this object I have chosen. In acceptance that you do not harm me but the one I have called you forth, now come, demon, so mote it be. And then once that is complete, they would cleanse the circle and the demon would remain in the item. And then after putting the item in their enemy's possession, the demon would do the evil deeds upon them. And that's it. I wonder if you put the demon inside like food and they ate the food, if the demon would be inside them. But let's move on to last but not least, number 1, Bluin's Satanic Death. So this one comes with a fun disclaimer. Only Satanists can use it, and it leads to someone's death. How chilling. So I'm gonna leave out the spell components of this because I don't want any of you going around spiting anybody with the intent of death. That's not chill. So in general, this spell asks the caster to put all of their spite into one place and then fill yourself up with a plan of revenge. The incantation calls upon the power of Satan and the powers of darkness to bestow their power upon the Satanist so their target will die. They also cut the item they made into 4 pieces and burn one with fire, bury one in the earth, place one in a large body of water, and burn the last one to ashes and throw it in the air. And then lastly, it calls for the caster to thank the crowned gods of hell and say out loud the name of the person who is to die. So don't do this one at home, kids. Great.
At number 10, we have Chernobyl. Alright, let's kick off this list with a great one that we've definitely talked about on this channel before, but not in the witch form at all. If you don't know what went down at Chernobyl, well, a big old power plant had a nuclear reactor that exploded and basically released enough radiation to make the whole area unlivable for 200,000 years. This is obviously a huge bummer. That is terrible for the real estate market. But some people swear that when the power plant was up in flames, they saw a demonic winged creature known as the Black Bird. Now, how did the Black Bird come to be? Well, some people think it could have been Mother Nature creating a demonic force to repel the power plant because it was bad for the environment. And other people think that it was summoned by some sort of cult, maybe even a cult that was made by the workers who worked inside the Chernobyl plant. I love how quickly these theories degrade. Like, it starts as a power plant blew up because the mismanaging of the people working there. Then it goes to the CIA did it as a way to corrupt the Russian infrastructure, and now we've worked all the way down to there's a demonic cult that was working inside of Chernobyl and summoned a demon which led to the end of everything. Things are getting out of hand. At number 9, we have Japanese tsunami. Man, I didn't even know that Japan had a witch culture, but apparently they do. And some of the more superstitious people out there think that this was the cause of the tsunami that hit Japan in March of 2011 after a massive earthquake stirred everything up. Okay, so why did this earthquake and tsunami happen? Well, because tectonic plates move underneath us and sometimes they collide, causing earthquakes, which can then cause a tsunami. So no, that's of course not where these things come from. It was from the supernatural. Most people in the world would blame this natural disaster on Mother Nature, but there's a small group of people that think this was caused by the Kawaii witches of Japan. They say that it was the Kawaii witches angering the spirits with their witchcraft, which caused them to strike back against the Japanese people. Now, I'm obviously not a scientist, but I'm pretty sure that this whole thing wasn't caused by a bunch of witches, but I'm going to let you you at home decide for yourself. Like if natural disasters were caused by witches, I think Florida would get a lot less hurricanes. I don't think that place is ripe with witches just running around wild, unless witches love crack and alligators. At number 8, we have destroyed homes. Now, this disaster is a lot smaller than the other ones, but I wanted to put something like this on the list because it could personally affect all of you at home. There's a witch's spirit known as Kikimora. She visits people at night, and you always know she's there because she will leave wet footprints around your home. Like when your roommate walks from the bathroom back to his room without drying his feet off properly. You guys know what I'm talking about. Now, if Kikimora comes to visit you and you disrespect her, she will make you pay. She'll start smashing up your home, breaking dishes, even throwing furniture around, and shouting so loud she'll wake you up. So this isn't a huge disaster caused by a witch, but it is a personal one, and I care about you guys. At number 7, we got getting your soul sucked out. Yeah, not exactly how I want to spend my Friday night. This is about the ancient legend of Chidipe. She's from Indian folklore, and she's basically a woman who died during childbirth and got super pissed off and then comes back to life as this vampire witch creature. Some badass things about Chidipe is she rides a tiger, she can sneak into anyone's house at night without them hearing, and she's got six-pack abs. Very cool. Some not so cool things about her, she will sneak into your house at night and suck your soul out through your toes. Dude, why? I don't want anyone sucking on my toes. Please leave my soul alone. And my toes. This is why you gotta be under the covers at night, dude, because demons are trying to suck your toes. At number 6, we have Haitian poverty. If you're unfamiliar with Haitian history, then I've got to go through a lot for you guys. The country was used as a major slave and spice trading route and colonized by the French. The French controlled Haiti for years until the Haitian people armed themselves and pushed back against the French and became the first country in the Caribbean to gain independence. Now after this, Haiti was able to regroup and start to build the foundation of a stronger nation. It created industries like sugarcane and rum, and as time passed and technology improved, they were able to create a pretty stable tourism industry. Now this was all until the 80s when several corrupt leaders in civil unrest throughout the entire country turned everything in disarray. And then in 2010 the country was hit by a massive earthquake which was devastating to the entire country. Now why did I just tell you all this? Well, voodoo is a form of Haitian religion / witchcraft, and it has to do with them talking to spirits from the other side. Some old legends say that the Haitians used voodoo against the French in 1804 to push them out of the country. It was sort of like an extra backup they had. But the thing with voodoo is what goes around comes around. So all that dark energy that they used to help fight against the French returned and then turned the country into poverty. At least that's what they say, I don't know. At number 5, we have the fall of Greece. There have been many empires that have come and fallen, and usually it's because the mismanagement of people, or because of war, or because of disease. But some people who followed the old gods believe that the fall of Greece was caused by a lack of faith in Hecate. Hecate was the Greek goddess of witchcraft and is thought to be the be-all end-all of witches. She's like the queen bee of witchcraft. Now, many people worshipped her back in the day, but some of the other gods became more popular than Hecate and she was forgotten. Legend says that this angered the god, and because of this she put a curse on the people, sending the empire into disarray, and this is probably the source of Greece's money problems to this day. At number 4, we have your own death. Well, there's not really any bigger disaster than dying. It's kind of the worst thing that can happen to you besides losing your favorite Batman mug. Well, this is apparently all caused by the Morai. The Morai are the Sisters of Fate. They're basically like a group of witches that control the loom of fate, which is used to map out the lives of every single person ever created. Their creation is rooted in Greek mythology, and it's said only by meeting the sisters you can change your fate. So basically they're in control of everyone's life, which means they're also kind of in control of a lot of the disasters that have happened. I want to start off by saying that this one isn't really a disaster, but it was also something amazing and it had a hard push of power, so I wanted to include it on the list. In the number 3 spot, we have pushing back Hitler, something that was amazing for the entire world, but a disaster for the Nazis. During World War II, there was a powerful witch by the name of Aleister Crowley. He was one of the biggest forces behind bringing witchcraft back into the forefront. During the attack on England, Aleister gathered a bunch of his fellow witches to perform a seance to push Hitler back and stop them from invading England. Now, I don't want to take away from all the incredible work that the British forces and every other force did in fighting the Nazis, but I thought this was a cool one to throw on the list. Even witches hated Hitler. That's pretty cool. At number 2, we have the Salem witch trial diseases. Back in 1692, there were some pretty questionable trials going on involving witches. People were being executed all over the place because everyone thought they were witches. And why did people think this? Well, there was a disease that was spreading throughout Massachusetts and causing many many young women to die horribly. Their bodies would contort in all sorts of weird ways, and many of them had blood run from their face and mouths. No one could figure out why this was happening, so everyone was like, well, it's probably witches. And maybe it was. That's why it's on this list. And at number 1, we have the Black Plague. Alright guys, taking the top spot is the Black Plague. Of course, a huge one. This is one of the greatest disasters known to man. People were dying all over the place and there was no cure in sight. No one knew how to combat this thing or where it was coming from. In some places like Paris, 800 people were dying a day. Dude, this disease was putting up Genghis Khan numbers. Now we all think that the whole plague was caused by Europeans being super unclean and rats running around and spreading sickness. But back then they didn't know what it was, so they started blaming everything on all sorts of different stuff, like God. Other people thought it was the end of the world, and a bunch of people thought that it was witches. People all over Europe started killing witches and anyone else who had a religion that didn't fit what they thought was right. These were small-minded people trying to cure a raging sickness. Maybe instead of burning people at the stake, they should have been washing their hands. That probably would have been the smart move, guys. I mean, at least with burning the bodies, it did actually kind of help stop the spread of the sickness. Well, I guess they didn't expect that, but it did happen.